Okay, terima kasih Puan
Okay.
Haziza. I take over the slides, yeah? So I take over the
Okay.
screen. Let me change to my presentation mode. I hope you all can see my screen. We're looking at a slide now, yeah? So, a very good afternoon. Selamat petang kepada semua. Nama saya Encik Ken Yap. Please just call me Kent. I am as per the very lovely introduction earlier, I am a licensing manager for Springer Nature. But essentially, what I do is I work with the libraries, your library, for example, and work with you as fellow researchers, lecturers, or even students to help provide what you need for you to do in terms of your daily basis in your career as either again as lecturers, researchers, or students with regards to content that can help you with that from Springer Nature. And today, thank you for joining today's session. Just before I begin, I think I just want to provide a little bit of housekeeping. So, as you have heard or you may know, we have two speakers today. First one is myself, and the other one is my colleague. So, the session will be broken into two different parts. The first part is mine, which I will guide you through in terms of what is open access, if you're not familiar with it, but more importantly, touching on this topic about the KONSEPt Transformative Agreement and how that impacts you as someone from UTeM, especially with regards to you if you are doing any kind of research and have the hope of publishing your work, hopefully in open access as well. So that's my part. I'm going to share with you about the commercial terms, how this may impact you, how do you qualify, what are the benefits that you get. And we'll take a short break, about 2 to 3 minutes, and then we'll be followed by my colleague session where she will talk more on the authoring aspect. So if you're having, for example, challenges with regards to manuscript writing, selecting journals, encountering issues with peer review, what are the tips you may want to hear? That will be covered during her session. So it'll be quite, I would say, quite a lengthy session, and I hope you stay hydrated and you stay with us throughout the way. Please feel free to leave a comment or write a question in the chat. So even though I may not see it, my colleagues will be able to acknowledge them. And of course, we will be able to address them either halfway through or even towards the end of the both of the segments. Okay, so we don't have a very large crowd, which is okay. And in fact, this I think is a great opportunity for you to uh, ask as many questions as you like, and also to be able to fully comprehend, I think, what is an amazing initiative, plenty of benefits that you get now through this initiative. So let us begin. So first and foremost, I think the nice thing to do would be to introduce who I am and who we are and who I represent. So I represent this academic and research publisher called Springer Nature, both Shen and myself. And we're, an academic publisher that's considered quite large. I think one of the top 2 or 3 in the world. You might have seen many of our names or imprints before. So the company is called Springer Nature now, but underneath the umbrella brand, you will notice or you might have seen either in the library or in your textbooks, the logos of things like Springer. This is the chess piece, Palgrave Macmillan, for those of you who are more familiar in the social sciences, or even the Nature portfolio, for those of you who I guess are a bit more senior. So we come from the research division, and basically under this division, we handle about, as a company, we handle about 1 million plus submissions in terms of people, authors like yourself, submitting their manuscripts to us, and we publish roughly 1/3 to 1/4 of that in the last year or so. So we have a presence all over the world, including here in Malaysia, which again myself and Shen and one other colleague are based. But our nearest editorial house is actually in Singapore for those of us in the Southeast Asia region. So Springer Nature, we are quite a big proponent on open access, which is partially or one of the main topics of today. So for those of you who are not exactly familiar with the term open access, I hope you are. If not, then allow me to explain. Basically, open access means research that has been published, publicly available, and can be read, or utilized by anyone because it's already made available. So as one of the leading academic and research publishers, we are a very big proponent to that, and that can be seen manifested by us publishing over 1 million journal articles immediately as open access over the years. And we are one of the first, if not the first, to introduce an imprint that is purely open access through our Biomed Central imprint. So, if for those of you who are in or practicing in the life sciences field, you may be familiar with the name BMC or Biomed Central. You would be familiar that all of the titles under BMC are 100% open access. So we've been through this journey for quite a long time now, and we've supported over 2.5 million authors and growing every single day, including here in Malaysia and including within your university at UTeM, to publish their research findings as open access within our portfolio of journals, and not to forget books as well. So why do we believe so much in open access? And I hope you do too. And I think it's safe to say that in our current society, in the current day and age, um, towards solving the world's greatest challenges. And one great example of that is the COVID-19 pandemic that we just encountered several years ago. Open access leads to greater opportunities, essentially. So, as a society, we want to move to a direction where information is more readily accessible, is more equitable, is fairly shared with all demographics of society. Doesn't matter whether you're from a poor background or a richer country, or whether or not you speak a certain language or not. Science or the research findings of scientists and researchers like yourself should be and could be made more openly possible to anyone around the world, in order for everyone, for us as a species to benefit, so that we can continue to build on that research and hopefully address our world's greatest challenges. And not only that, open science, and then in the manifestation of open access articles from a publisher standpoint, we believe it has many benefits, not to just you and I within the research or formal research ecosystem. So I'm talking about for us as, again, researchers or staff of a university, of a certain ministry that is involved highly in doing research, and as publishers, but also for those of our friends, so the people who we know who are outside of academia, for example. So people who are in the media, people in government, people in the NGOs, or just the average person on the street. Through open access, we are able to provide, again, to provide the research findings of the incredible work that you do, to be able to be accessible by even them who are outside of the typical scientific or research ecosystem. Right? And there are so many benefits in doing so. When we open this up, we boost economic growth. We allow the general media and even social media to take notice of the work that has been done by researchers and scientists, so that it can be shared to, again, with more people from different parts of the world. It makes access to, like typically things that are only accessible to, well-known research organizations, to be uh, benefited by people from all walks of life. But even within the research ecosystem itself, like for those of us here, there is great benefit to publishing things in open access. And I can include, if we look at the traditional metrics for things like utilization of articles or how many people are reading, open access typically, as we have found through many surveys that we have done, provides almost up to 6 times higher utilization or reading in terms of the papers that are being put out as compared to those that are published behind a paywall. And for researchers or scientists and academicians, I'm sure you also are measuring in terms of the typical citations metric. And open access papers typically record a 1.6 times higher citation value, as opposed to similar subscription articles, again, those that are published behind a paywall instead. And when we talk about open access publications in the perspective of journal articles, there are several types of open access. So again, for those of you who are more familiar with this topic or this term called open access, there are several types of open access articles. And the ones that we'll be touching on today, and the ones that you will get benefit through the Springer KONSEPt Transformative Agreement, is actually the gold version of open access. So there are other versions like green or bronze, and this will entail, although publicly available as well. So for example, a manuscript that is written by an author from UTeM, if you wanted to publish it in your repository, that version is typically what we call the green open access model, whereby it is the author accepted version that has gone through peer review, no doubt, but it is the author accepted version, and therefore not the nicely edited, finally polished version that is typically published on the publisher's website. And although it is freely available to be obtained or accessed through your university or your library's repository, that in itself is not the final version. It's also, as far I'm not very sure, but it can be, of course, double checked. But it's also not necessary. It may not have a DOI as well, and therefore citing it poses a problem. And then, of course, finally, the availability or the readiness or the accessibility to that repository may be limited to certain people who have access to it only as well, as opposed to something like the gold open access version, which is the final polished peer review copy edited nicely beautified version that is ultimately published on the publisher's website. So like for us on Springer Nature Link, for example, and it is the one with the DOI, it is the one that is cited, the one that you can share with anyone around the world because it is already made publicly available the moment it is published online. So that's what gold open access means. And as we have also surveyed many researchers and readers from around the world, the gold open access is the gold standard of the art version of the article that everybody will want to have access to because it is the final, again, the polished version that everybody can trust and can refer to when you are citing it, for example. All right. So when I mentioned earlier that there we wanted to bring to you as part of today's session, the good news of the announcement of the Springer KONSEPt Open Access Agreement for Malaysia. This is a screenshot from the public announcement that we've made on our website. I believe you've also seen a similar announcement on your library website. I've seen it, whereby it announces to the world that there is this arrangement between Malaysia and Springer Nature that encompasses the KONSEPt Consortium, which essentially represents the 20 public universities in Malaysia. And through this agreement, members of any of these 20 public institutions have massive benefits that you can immediately already get benefit from, but also continue to benefit in terms of the publication aspect. And my job today is to explain to you what are those benefits and how you can get them. Okay, so you can Google just Springer Nature or KONSEPt Open Transformative Agreement Malaysia Springer Nature. You should be able to get to this site, and if not, I think we will distribute these slides later so that you are able to utilize the links that I put here on the screen and go to this website. But this website is also important, and that's the reason why I'm showing it, because it entails it will provide live information on several things, including the current status of the agreement, whether or not your institution is still part of it, continues to be part of it throughout time, and also the list of eligible journals that are qualified as part of this agreement, and which I will explain a little more after this. So the TA, and that's short form for transformative agreement, and I'll continue to use the term TA and TA throughout time. TA basically has two parts to it. So the TA itself is just, you think of it as a contract that was signed between KONSEPt, and again, the 20 public universities, the Ministry of Higher Education, and Springer Nature. So this contract entails two different parts and two major halves. There is a read portion and there is a publishing portion. Okay. And all of this is what you will cover, what are the benefits that you get through this contract arrangement, essentially. So from the read part, what it means is that through this agreement, users or members from the 20 public institutions, including UTeM, through the read part, you will have access to all 2,300 Springer Nature journals that are from under the imprints of Springer, ADIS, Palgrave, and academic journals. These will be accessible on two different platforms. The first is the Springer Nature Link platform, which you can find already on your library website. And number two is the nature.com platform, which hosts a small number of the academic journals that I mentioned earlier. So through the read portion, you have access. So as of right now, in fact, as of May this year, you can immediately go via your library website to either one of those platforms, and I again repeat, Springer Nature Link and nature.com, to access unlimitedly all 2,300 hybrid and subscription journals within our portfolio that I mentioned earlier. So this represents almost everything within the portfolio. And if we couple that together with already fully open access journals, like the ones I mentioned from BMC earlier as an example, this would in total allow you to have access to close to 3,000 journals and the tens of millions of articles that have published within them from the current year, including those that are published here today in 2025, all the way back to 1997, whichever available. So if the journal is older than 1997, then you get up to 1997. If the journal is only as old as year 2000, then it's up to year 2000. Okay, so this, in comparison to what was previously not available through your university library, now you have complete access to almost everything within the portfolio. The only ones that are not part of this agreement is what we call the nature journals on nature.com. And that is only a small group of journal titles, about 100 of them. But even those journals themselves are hybrid journals that would also publish some open access articles within them. So even that is accessible to you. But more importantly, I want to repeat again, the Read Access, which is sponsored by the Ministry of Higher Education for you to utilize freely via each and every one of your universities. You have access to 2,300 hybrid and subscription journals from Springer, ADIS, Palgrave, and academic journals. That is the read portion. So that is allowing you to gain access to our portfolio of journals in order for you to, what I presume to be the start of your research cycle, right? So in order for you to conduct research, you typically have to do literature review, you have to read up on the subject matter, and that read portion allows you to do so, right? On the opposite side, or the flip side, there is the publishing aspect. And this is where it's, I guess, a little bit more exciting for you as well, especially if you are an active author, an active researcher who is writing papers constantly, and you have the intention to publish with Springer Nature moving forward. The Springer KONSEPt Transformative Agreement allows you to, or gives you the benefit of publishing your open access article, your article, as a gold open access article within any of the 2,000 plus hybrid Springer, ADIS, Palgrave, and academic journals without any charges of the APCs, the article processing charges, to be borne by you as the individual. Okay, so I repeat, you can publish as gold open access your articles, your manuscripts, without the cost of the APCs to be bared by yourself. You can publish them in a list of eligible journals, and they are all hybrid journals. And the list of journals are the ones that can be found on the announcement website that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so this is essentially what the transformative agreement provides for. So now I need to explain to you how you can go about doing so. But before we get to that, I just want to explain again, for the term TA is probably a little bit new to many of you. And basically transformative agreements is like I said, a contractual arrangement between Springer and the Ministry of Higher Education and your university. And what it does, it essentially allows for the arrangement of what used to be two separate workflows or two separate pathways. So in typically prior to the existence of a transformative agreement, your library would have a subscription to any one of our journals, and the library would manage that subscription. So they would pay a certain amount and subscribe to whichever journals that they can afford to, whichever ones they choose to, depending on budgets and funding and which faculties need supporting and etc. etc. They will of course typically do surveys with the university, with you as researchers or faculty members to understand where the demand for certain access to certain journals are. You as researchers would then continue to publish your manuscripts that have been accepted by journals within our portfolio, and you choose to do so either as a behind a paywall, so you would publish it at no cost to you, or alternatively, if you had chosen to publish your manuscripts as gold open access, would be asked to pay for the APCs by yourselves. And whether or not the university has a policy or a mechanism whereby perhaps, for example, the research management center would take over would bear the costs of the APCs, that it all is done through a separate pathway or workflow as opposed to the subscription. But the TAs or the transformative agreements combines all of that into one formal arrangement. And because of that combination, it makes it more flexible. It's more time efficient, as I will demonstrate to you. As authors, you no longer have to, if you wanted, to again bear the burden of the APC costs because it's expensive and it's tedious, as you have to receive an invoice, obtain funding either from yourself or from the university or from your co-collaborators, for example. But now instead, all you have to do is just click a few buttons, certain acknowledgements and approval process, and everything can be done as quickly as 24 hours. It's also the TAs are also more sustainable and equitable because through this arrangement, the university no longer has to choose who to support or where they can only provide support. So of course, in a perfect world where money is no issue for anyone, I'm sure your university would support every single one of the demographic or the different faculties within the university. But undoubtedly, as I think as everyone is well aware, with the funding challenges that are faced by our public academic system in recent times, or in the last decade or so, it is quite common to know that, of course, the library, for example, would not be able to support 100% all of the requests that are coming from every single either student or researcher from the university in terms of providing access to the journals they would want. But through the TA, this is now made possible because we open up anything and everything that is possible to open up, regardless of whether it's from a niche subject matter all the way to something that is very common or popular or one of the strengths of your university. And of course, it will then also include things that are not necessarily relevant to university, and that opens up another whole horizon for you all as researchers. Right? So, what are the benefits of the TA and how that translates to the different demographics within the university? And for those of you who I'm speaking to today, you are from the authors in terms of the type of stakeholders. And what you stand to gain the most is, again, because of the read, you have access to all of the latest Springer journals and articles, including those in as old as 1997. So prior to this year or prior to May, very access to some very old journals from Springer. And because of this arrangement, you now went from handful to now over 2,300. This would be equivalent to for even bigger than any of the big public universities in Malaysia in what their libraries were able to provide. So now for you within your university, you do not have to go and ask your friends from other universities. You don't have to reach out to perhaps your friends from overseas, for example. You do not need to. Now you have direct access through your library website to access almost 100% of the portfolio of what is available, especially hybrid journals and the articles that are published within that. So this should improve your efficiency of doing literature review. So you spend more time actually looking for content in the right place instead of facing hindrances like a paywall every time you try to search for something, right? And at the end of the publishing cycle, you're able to publish your work as gold open access without having to bear the APC costs. So I wish I was with you in a room today, because I would then ask all of you, for example, if any one of you had the experience of publishing an open access article before. Whether or not it's with Springer Nature or another publisher, typically the cost of an APC is quite substantial, right? And those of you who are familiar with publishing with Springer Nature, I think you would also be familiar with the cost of the APCs for Springer Nature. Sometimes they would range, not sometimes, they would range anywhere from between several hundred euros, which is a very small minority of titles, all the way to as expensive as 15,000 euros. So to pay that cost of the APC to be borne by either a single researcher or even a group of researchers without financial support from either your funders or from the university would typically be the main hindrance for you to opt to publish your work as open access, particularly gold open access. So through the TA, this is then eliminated because you are able to obtain the benefit of publishing your manuscript as gold open access without you having to bear the APC costs. So you can publish as open access in any one of the hybrid journals and you don't have to pay for it, right? So you don't have to set aside a certain amount from your grant funding. You don't have to take money from out of your own pockets to pay for the APCs, nor do you have to search for external funding from either your external collaborators or utilizing a different kind of fund that you may have wanted to use for a different purpose as well. So when you publish as gold open access, that's not just the end of the story. You also obtain through publishing open access, you gain increased visibility and viewership of your article because it's made immediately publicly available, right? This hopefully then leads to increased citations and recognition of your work. More people can view it from within and also beyond the academic ecosystem, as I said, as I demonstrated in my slides earlier. And this hopefully leads to more immediate impact of your work and therefore raises your professional profile and potentially increases also your chances of gaining more recognition and being invited to do more collaborative work with international researchers all over the world. So if I could summarize it, that would essentially mean greater reach and impact for you as individual authors, all through this special arrangement that was started back in May without you having to do anything. Okay. So of course, there are also benefits to the library and the university itself. Essentially, for the library, this is a more cost-effective measure. I'm not aware whether UTeM, for example, or whether the RMC is the one that would, for example, has a program or a mechanism whereby they too subsidize the APC costs within the university. But even then, doing so, if they were to have its active subscription to any one of our Springer journals, regardless of the size of the package or however many number of journals that it would entail, that cost would definitely be higher than what the TAs would normally be able to provide. So it's not only more cost effective, it is more sustainable because it is a group, it is a what you call a consortium arrangement with the support of the Ministry of Higher Education, and as well, it prevents them or removes the need for them to be able to nit and pick or to selectively support and unable to support some of the members of your university. So for those of you, and I'll just use this as a general an example, not necessarily reflective of you in UTeM, but any of you from the social sciences faculties, for example, you may have felt that previously or generally that your faculty is less supported by the university as opposed to the physical sciences, or from your friends from the engineering side, your friends from the physics or medicine or life sciences side, right? So through the TA, the university and the library no longer has to selective or to be more selective in who they support, because this provides equal an equitable opportunity for everyone within the university, regardless of your background, as either a young researcher or a very senior professor, whether or not you're representing a small faculty or the largest faculty from within your university, right? So as I said, for authors, when you publish as Gold Open Access, which the TA provides you the ability to do so, you can expect that your work would get a lot more citations, get a lot more altmetric attention. And for those of you not familiar what altmetric is, altmetric just basically means alternative metrics measurement. So it measures or provides a score for things like how many times has been mentioned in social media, how many times it's been mentioned in general media like Bernama or CNN, for example. Different people from all across the world have utilized your work as the let's say the basis for a particular public policy. So all of these things are measured and can be tracked and is given a score. So because your articles, if published open access, will be more widely available and more quickly available, the likelihood of people taking advantage, and what I mean by taking advantage is having access to, using it as a basis to support their own research, and of course, using it as policy to support, the benefits or the advancements or the solutions of the world, right, to the world's problem. So essentially, and now I'll go back to recap a little bit about the read side. So the read part, again, access to all 2,300 journals is given directly to any one of the 20 public institutions. So you don't have to go and ask your friends from USM or UTM, UTeM, which maybe you normally do because you would think that they are larger universities with more funding and therefore more access. Now, all 20 public universities of higher education has equal access. So your library, in terms of content from Springer Nature, is just as good as any other public university in Malaysia. Read Access is sponsored and covered and paid for by the Ministry of Higher Education. And access is granted directly to each institution and no umbrella access. And this is important as perhaps I think in the past there have been some what we call umbrella access databases. So databases that you can get, you would have to go through something like a funnel, or you have limited access to because it has to be shared with all other users from all other different universities in Malaysia, for example. You do not have to go through that for KONSEPt TA. So basically, access to all of those journals that I mentioned would be covered and would be accessible unlimitedly. It's multiple concurrent. So just go to your library website, look for Springer Nature link or nature.com, and then click on it and visit it, and then you can immediately start using. So as long as you've done all the authentication through the library website, which you would normally do to gain access to any of the subscribed databases, just do so, follow the steps, and of course, if you encounter issues, I encourage you to reach out to your library for them to support you technically. But there is no limitation, so as long as you've been recognized as an authorized user from UTeM, you should have no issue accessing any content that is part of the portfolio that we have put forward, including those of articles that are published today or this year and as old as 1997. This is the breakdown of the different subject areas of the different imprints. So of the 2,300, the majority of is under the Springer brand. And the Springer brand or imprint is actually multidisciplinary. It covers everything from social sciences all the way to physical sciences. So if you're talking things like medicine, chemistry, material science, physics, any of the engineering, mathematics, chemistry, whatever, all the way to the other side of the spectrum, including language, business, politics, sociology, culture, religion, business, accounting, everything is included, right? There also is ADIS, Palgrave, and academic journals. And these different imprints have their own strengths as well, albeit not as large in terms of the portfolio. So for those of you working in the life sciences or more particularly in the pharmacology or pharmaceutical space, you would recognize the ADIS brand. For those of you from the social sciences side, I think you would recognize the name Palgrave or Macmillan, and this is where a lot, and this is the strength of this portfolio. And then lastly, there is the academic journals. That's the name of the imprint. And it is actually a bunch of society-owned journals that are published with Springer Nature, but want to see a list, I believe the library has one. If not, it's not necessary really, as I said. So if as long as you go to Springer Nature Link, almost everything there should be accessible to you within the range of 2025 to 1997. And more excitingly and more importantly is the publishing model. So the publishing model is actually a co-funded model. Your university is an active contributor to this funding. So both JPT and the university has contributed to a fund, basically think of it as a fund that allows for the coverage of the APCs so that you don't have to bear that cost. And you're allowed to publish your articles as gold open access in any one of the hybrid journals that I mentioned earlier. So what I mean by when it says here qualified and approved, essentially your articles from the moment of submission and all the way through the peer review process, if your manuscript has been accepted by the journal and the editor of the journal, your paper will be qualified and will be sent through an approval process to the university in order for them to approve to cover the APC costs if you wanted to publish your paper as gold open access. And this approval process is done via something called the AAS. You can't see the AAS, but just wanted to let you know there is something that exists, and that's how the approval process is done. So essentially, every time several steps, it's just basically a few clicks of a button that I will show you after this. And then your paper gets sent to this AAS where the university evaluates the submission, and they evaluate it from the perspective of the genuineness of they basically validate your submission. They don't check the quality of the paper because that has already been done by the journal itself. So when the university approves or rejects your submission, it has nothing to do with how good or how not good your paper is, because that is not in question, as your papers have already gone through the peer review process, but they are basically just checking whether or not you are genuinely from your university, whether the research that you are publishing has any relation to the university, and are you, or for example, is this active research that's been done or something that you may be from UTeM, but it has nothing to do with the university, for example. Okay, so on top of that, only original research papers and review papers are accepted as part of this transformative agreement arrangement. So if you're writing either one of these types, and this would make up more than 90% basically of all of the research papers that are being published in Springer Nature and coming from Malaysia, as long as your paper is either original research paper, so this is what we call papers, or review papers, both will be considered as qualified and can be subject to proof by the university. And the publishing list, which means these are the type of eligible journals that you can submit to in order for your paper to be published as Go Open Access and you not having to bear the cost of the APC. Right? So something to also bear in mind is that although I have mentioned several times that if you are qualified and get approved by the university to pay the APCs for you, they will only cover the APC costs. It will not cover any other ancillary or optional costs that is related to the publication of your paper. And I will give you an example of this. So take, for example, if you have been, you've submitted your paper to Journal A, the editor has accepted your paper after you've gone through the peer review process. You have now agreed to publish your paper as open access. You've confirmed your affiliation with UTeM, for example, and before you head off to production, the editor itself has asked you, would you like to include color costs? Color, warna. So, for example, is if your manuscript were to be printed as a physical copy, because images within your manuscript and the images are important to reflect the findings or the research of your paper itself, the editor or the journal is offering a color cost option. And this color cost option say it's worth 500 euros, right? If you opt for that option, and they are most of the time, and if not all of the time, completely optional, if you opt for it, the university will not cover that cost. You as the individual will still have to cover that cost. as it is separate from the APC cost itself. Okay, so although you've been approved, if there are any other optional costs that you have agreed to as part of the production and publication of your manuscript, it will be backed by you, and therefore you will receive an invoice, and you have to settle and clear that invoice before your article is published online, even though the university would have already covered the cost of the APC. So if the optional charges are not taken care of first, even if the university approves, it cannot go to it. It cannot be published essentially. Okay, so this is usually where we get a lot of the questions, and I encourage you to write your questions down in either the chat box or the Q&A section. I'm not sure if we have that option, but just write it down somewhere, and we can address them later on, or even if Shen, if it's possible, if you see any other questions, just stop me and read them out to me. So one thing I want to point out is that there is technically a quota for the number of articles that can be covered. I mean, I'm talking about the APC coverage that comes from your university. And that number or that quota is a yearly quota. And for UTeM for the year of 2025, that quota is 5 papers. Okay, so that means throughout the entire year, the university is able to cover on your behalf the APC costs for any 5 articles, right, that are being accepted and then ultimately sent into the AAS system for what we call the approval managers to approve on behalf of the university. Okay, so 5. If I'm not mistaken, as of today, since we started in May, already 3 groups of authors that are from UTeM, or at least representing UTeM, has already benefited from this. And there remains a quota of 2 left for the rest of the year. So if you are thinking of submitting, or if you are already halfway submitting, any one of you can qualify. And basically, it will be treated as a first come, first serve basis. So if you're, let's say right now, already halfway through peer review, once your paper has been accepted, you can then select, click the few buttons, which I will show you the screenshot of after this. Essentially, then it will enter the AAS system, and it will be treated or evaluated from a first come, first serve basis. All right. So as of today, and we're right now the 2nd of September 2025, until 31st of December 2025, there's 2 more left, 2 more quotas. So even if you have not yet submitted, you can still qualify. If you just have to submit, go through peer review, get your papers editorially accepted, and if there is still a quota at the end by that stage, and I believe a live notification is being put on the library website itself. So they tell you on a daily basis, being updated daily essentially, of how many quotas are they left. All right. Now, in order to identify which journals are qualified, that means which ones that you can submit to, or if you have already submitted to and going through peer review right now, which ones would be part of the eligible list of the hybrid journals. So going back to that announcement website, if you scroll to the bottom, you will see this link to download eligible journals. I will ask you to treat this as the version of truth, as this list of eligible journals changes over time. This is because if you are familiar with the publishing ecosystem or landscape, journals can switch between hybrid or non-hybrid, hybrid to fully open access, hybrid to subscription, subscription to hybrid, or fully open access to hybrid at any time throughout the year. And as long as that title is part of this eligible list, which is updated regularly, your manuscript will be able to be qualified and should be able to enter the AAS for approval by the university. So if you have not yet submitted and wanted to check which journal is qualified, you can of course refer to this. And of course, if you're already halfway through, if you know that your journal is a hybrid journal, then, or you can of course again check versus this list to find out whether or not your article can be qualified under the TA to get the benefit of the APC coverage. So the author's journey itself. So I've explained to you up to this stage what is covered and how it is covered. Now I want to perhaps give you a little bit more context and put into your mind, for example, if you were doing the submission process, what does it look like and what are the things that are different with regards to the TA, and how can then you take action in order to be able to get the benefit lah, right? So from the manuscript preparation part to the submission and peer review section, everything is the same, regardless of whether the TA is in existence or not. So kalau ada ke tak ada TA tersebut, manuscript preparation dan submission dan peer review adalah sama. So basically, when you're writing your manuscript, what's different now is only that you have more access to more Springer journals that you can use for your literature review. But in terms of the writing part, choosing which journal to submit, the peer review part, everything is the same, right? What's only difference is when it comes between the peer review in submission, between that and the production process. So essentially, somewhere between here, that's where you can start to see the difference of how the TA is implemented. So when your paper has been editorially accepted, so essentially you've gone through peer review, the editor has said, congratulations, your paper has been accepted, and you get informal notice of your acceptance, only then will you be able to take the steps necessary to qualify for the Gold Open Access with the APC covered on your behalf, right? So I want to guide you through step by step so that you get a better understanding. But my colleague Shen will elaborate even more on this during her section. So imagine if you're now, I'm just going to use an example as someone who's completely starting from stage 1. So that means finding a suitable journal, right? So if you're going to Springer Nature link on nature.com, or let's say you have no idea at all, what you can do is you can go to either one of the platforms. You can search for either the keywords of your hypothesis, or you can search the keywords of the subject matter you're researching, or you can utilize something called the journal finder. So essentially a journal finder is something like an AI tool, essentially, whereby you can copy and paste, like say your abstract or your title of your work in progress manuscript, put it in there, and it will be able to refer to you something between perhaps 3 to 5 or even more options for you to publish, to submit your paper to, basically, because it matches the aims and scope and the type of papers that are accepted by those journals within our list of 2,300. Okay, so once you have either selected it or found a few journals by yourself or use the journal finder, what you should do is you should go to the homepage of that journal and look for a few things. Double confirm the aims and scope again. So although you use the journal finder, you still have to double check. That's a good practice. Make sure it matches completely, and if not the majority of the aims and scope matches your manuscript. Look at the editorial board, look at the submission guidelines, look at the pre-submission checklist if there are any, and then more importantly, in the context of the TA, check whether or not it is a hybrid journal. So if it's listed as a hybrid journal, then of course you would already know that if as long as there is still quotas left from the university, they can cover the APC cost for you should you choose to publish as open access. Okay, so this is an example of just a random journal. There's no relation to UTeM or the group today. But for example, this journal called Asia Pacific Education Review, you will notice that it's listed as publishing model hybrid. So what hybrid means essentially, if you haven't got it up to this point, is that this journal has the ability to publish manuscripts or papers that have been editorially accepted as either, number one, is subscription or a closed journal. What this means is that that article lives behind a paywall, and only users or libraries or people with a subscription to this journal can read the full text of that article that is published behind a paywall. At the same time, this journal can also publish a gold open access article. So this journal has both. That's why it's called a hybrid, right? So some will be subscription based, some will be open access articles, right? So as long as you see this hybrid term there under publishing model, it is and would be normally be part of the TA's eligible list, and therefore you can go ahead and submit to it. And if there is still quotas left, by the time you get editorially accepted and you submit to the university to approve and to pay on your behalf, they would be able to do so. If it's a fully open access journal or a subscription
fully subscription-based journal, that means you see the word subscription here or full open access, then it will not be part of the TA itself. This is because for subscription, in one case, subscription means that this journal cannot publish any open access articles. Every one of the articles are published behind a paywall, and therefore all of the authors are not subjected to an APC, right? And this is the same for any journal, basically, that gives you the ability to publish as a closed or subscription-based article. You will not need to pay a single cent for APC. Okay, to be clear, for most, especially for Springer Nature and for most credible publishers, if your paper is going to be published behind a paywall, you will not need to pay the article processing charges. Right? There are, legitimate publishers will not ask you to pay for something that they would require somebody else to pay in order to access the content. They will only ask you, or we will only ask you to pay APCs if you want to make your article as open access. Right? I hope that is clear, and I hope that you'll be able to practice that as a general rule of thumb moving forward. Right? So what is also important to note is that typically the one who is going through this entire process of looking for the right journal, submitting that journal, communicating with the peer reviewers and the editors is what we call the corresponding author, right? So a corresponding author can be also be the main author or the main investigator. But at the same time, it is also possible that for another article, the corresponding author is not the main investigator, right? But so as long as the person who is the one that is, again, going to the platform, creating an account, submitting, uploading a copy of your manuscript to the system, communicating with the editor, responding to peer reviews, queries and comments and rejections, you are what is called as the corresponding. Okay, so it is the corresponding author's responsibility to go through this entire process, and they are the ones who are also going to control the probability, the possibility of the manuscript after it's being accepted by the journal to enter the AAS of UTEM. So I'll give you two scenarios. Now, for one, for example, for those of you here, I presume all of you are related or associated with UTEM. If you are part of a group of 5 UTEM researchers working on a single paper, and you are being nominated from the group of authors to become the corresponding author and do the submission. So it doesn't matter whether or not you are the main investigator, therefore the main author, or whether or not, for example, you could be the PhD student, but your professor is the main investigator or author. As long as you're the one you are associated with UTEM, and when you are doing the submission process, at the end of the submission process, you will be asked to confirm your affiliation. And because your affiliation is with UTEM, once the paper has been approved, it will enter the AAS for UTEM. So the AAS for each university is separate. And in this first scenario, as I explained, because you as the corresponding author are from UTEM, your paper will enter the AAS of UTEM. But in the second scenario that I'll give you, for example, let's say you are just one representative from UTEM, and you have 4 other collaborators from different universities. Some are from the local university, let's say UM or USM, and then some are also from universities outside of Malaysia. So let's say from the UK or from the US. Now, if you are not the corresponding author from that group, and let's say the corresponding author is from USM, for example, and they are the ones who are submitting to this paper, kita ambil contoh, then once it has been editorially accepted, and once your friend, your colleague who is from USM has confirmed their affiliation is with USM, the paper will enter USM's AAS. And then it is dependent on whether USM would approve to cover the APC charges, or if they are going to reject it. Now, to let you all know formally that there is actually a standard what we call approval or what we call qualification requirements or criteria set about by the Ministry of Higher Education. So essentially, if I go back to this slide, so as long as you have submitted your paper to any one of the eligible lists and it is an original or review paper, it should already be qualified, and therefore those are the minimum requirements. So as long as they meet both of these criteria, when you have submitted your paper and get editorially accepted, the university can accept your submission and therefore cover the APC cost. However, it is understood that there are different universities. So of the 20 public universities under KONSEPt, some universities apply a slightly different rule on top of the basic criteria. So everyone still adheres to the basic criteria of, for example, again, either original or review paper, and must be submitted to any one of the eligible list. Okay, so on top of this basic criteria, some universities add an additional layer of criteria on top of that. It can be, for example, the manuscript must be submitted to a journal who is only Q1 or Q2, or it must be indexed in Scopus, or it must be only from engineering, only will they approve, etc., etc. So to confirm to confirm whether or not your university has additional criteria with regards to this, I think it's worthwhile for you to check with the university or even with the library in this case. So again, it by right should not matter whether or not you have submitted to a business journal ataupun chemical engineering punya journal. By right, all should be qualified. It should not matter whether you are a student or a PhD student or a senior professor in the university. That is not part of the what do you call it, the basic qualification criteria in order to qualify to enter the AAS. But again, some universities may have additional requirement. So going back to that second scenario where I said you may be part of a list of a group of authors, but the main corresponding author is from USM. So if your manuscript, because you're part of that authors, is also, you would also claim that as part of your paper, but that submission will go to USM, and it is up to USM to basically assess that paper based on their rules on whether or not they want to accept or reject that criteria. Okay, so essentially what happens then, during the peer review process, some things to highlight. So essentially, the peer review process will take time. I think many of you who are published with Springer before are familiar with this, or basically if you publish with any legitimate publisher, the more popular it is, usually the longer it takes to get a response because of the number of submissions. Every journal is different. Walaupun semua berada di bawah Springer Nature, but every journal under Springer Nature is operated independently with their own board of editors, and therefore they do things slightly differently at a slightly different pace. Right? So most journals will mention on the website or the homepage that you saw earlier for like this screen. If you check carefully, it should be able to mention a metric, especially if the journal is more than 2 years old, how long the median time is from submission to first decision. So albeit this is only median and is not 100% representative of every single submission to that journal, but it gives you a sense on roughly how long it should take for you to expect a reply, for example, at least for the first stage. And for journals who are very, very popular and receive hundreds and thousands of submissions daily, then you would expect this number to be even higher. Okay, so words of advice, and I think more of this will be covered by my colleague's session after this. But essentially, the peer review process should be kept virtual, meaning go through it professionally, respond quickly when it's your turn to respond. And if you felt that it's taken too long, you're of course within your rights to write back to the journal to get an update on what's going on with your paper, and of course do everything within the guidelines. And I think as I said, Shen will give you more insight onto this later on. But here is a screenshot of what would happen once you have been editorially accepted. So we've done many of these trainings now, like the one that you're having today, and some of your your colleagues from other universities, for example, have shared they have shown me personally, for example, Mr. Ken, look, I've got this email from the editor saying, congrats, I've already been accepted. Now, bear in mind, that is just what we call just an email. That does not represent this, for example, as a formal acceptance notification. So if you've ever received, or if you have no experience publishing with Springer Nature before, even if you get in, like what we call an informal email, and they're just saying like, congratulations, your paper is okay already, boleh jalan, we can move on to the next step now. Do not take just that email correspondence as a formal representation of, okay, that's it, kita tak payah buat anything anymore, kita just biarkan, it will get published. No. And in fact, we are very, very cognizant, dan kita pernah dengar, kita pernah tanya banyak kali, tak kisah sama ada it is a very junior researcher, mungkin first timer, ataupun very senior professor juga. There have been instances that have been shared with us, made known to us, whereby once they hear that notification, they just leave it as it is. That means they assume that everything else will be taken care for them. They just wait for the paper to show up online on the platform. No, the answer is no. Okay, please be very, very clear that if you get a formal notice like that, or even once you get this, that informal like email from the editor telling you everything is done, we'll send you a formal notice after this, or even if you get this formal notice, the process is not complete. Okay, you have to take action, and we have seen many, many authors from all around the world, and even here in Malaysia, where they have sat on this notice for some of them even more than 1 year. That means the editor is ready to publish, but because the author mungkin terlepas ke, terlalu happy, excited, and forgot about it, it cannot get sent to production because you have not finished certain steps. All right. But so to go back to this, once you have received a formal notice like this, it will say something like, Dear Dr. So-and-so, or whoever you are, we're delighted that your paper, this is the title of the paper, has been accepted. You now need to do certain things. There is a link here, as you can see, that you need to click to move to the next step. Okay. So if you don't do this, you will get in trouble, meaning your paper will get stuck there and cannot proceed to publication. And even if they send you chasers and chasers and chasers, you don't respond, the paper will just be left at this stage. Now, essentially what you have to do is that once you click on that, you will be asked to confirm again your affiliation. So bear in mind, this is all done by the corresponding author only. So if you wanted to increase the likelihood of your paper entering UTeM's consideration for them to approve, make sure that someone, whoever the corresponding author is from UTeM. If they are from an external university from outside of the KONSEPt group, then of course, unless they are from a university that also has a TA arrangement, which you have to ask them to check, then I think it's more better, or strategically more better, that any one of you from UTeM takes control of the process and becomes the corresponding author, right? So you will be asked to confirm your affiliation. So you will ask like, okay, where are you from? Which institution you're from? You're going to choose Malaysia. Then you're going to ask, for example, to double confirm your university specifically. So this screenshot example is from UMK, but it's just to give you an example. So basically, you will say, I'm from. So it is, of course, entirely possible that you would have changed affiliation from 6 months ago or from a year ago when you first submitted your paper to the journal to be evaluated, and it could be different today. Now, bear in mind, always if that paper is related to UTeM, and of course, if you're affiliated with UTeM, please select UTeM. Okay, because if you don't select UTeM, then of course it will not go into UTeM's AS for their approval. Once you have done so, you will say, okay, confirm everything. Then you will be given the option of choosing to publish your paper as Gold Open Access. So you will be asked, are you comfortable to publish your paper as Gold Open Access? Because we can see that your institution has a publishing arrangement with Springer Nature, all right? And if you click yes, and I agree, then you will end up with this slide. And basically you say, okay, submit for approval. So what happens when you click submit for approval? What you have to do is you don't have to do anything else. Your submission now enters the AS for the university, and the university evaluates it. How long? The university is supposed to take anywhere between 1 to 3 days at the initial stage to respond. They are able to ask for an extension of formally up to 7 days if they wanted to take more time to evaluate your submission. So what they'll do and what they'll be able to see is essentially these things. So they'll see who you are, what email you have used to submit, when did you submit it, what is the name of the journal and your article, what's the DOI number, who are your co-collaborators, have you put anything in the acknowledgement sections, have you declared that although you may be you are with UTeM, do you have other affiliations, who is the main author, who is not the main author, who is the other collaborators, where are they from, those kind of information. They are not evaluating and cannot see the full text of the manuscript, essentially, because they is not evaluating the quality of the paper. They are only validating the genuineness of the submission itself. So again, whether or not genuinely is this person who has submitted this submission is from UTeM, is the corresponding author at least from UTeM, who are the following authors, etc., etc. And of course, only submissions that have meet the basic requirements, so as I mentioned earlier, original paper or review paper, and has been submitted to any one of the eligible list of hybrid journals, can enter this step. All right. And if the corresponding author is affiliated with UTeM, it will go to UTeM's AS. If the corresponding author is affiliated with another university, it will enter there for them to evaluate. Once they have basically approved, you will get a notification that says, congratulations, your university has approved. And what you have to do then is then click another button, basically, which says sign your publishing license. So you have the system. And once that is done, then you will get assigned to an issue or a volume of the journal and get immediately published online when the issue is scheduled to be published. And it will be published, of course, in the form of a gold open access article. Now, what happens if the university rejects your submission or the quotas have run out? So in the first scenario, if the university rejects your submission, then you will get a notice that says, unfortunately, you've been rejected for whatever reason. You won't see the reason. It will just say you've been rejected. Now, this does not mean if you get a rejection from the university that you cannot proceed with publication. You can. And I go back and I repeat again, even either acceptance or rejection, it is not the reflection of the quality of the paper because the university is not evaluating the quality of your paper. Your paper is already qualified, or else it would not have been accepted by the editor and would not reach this stage. Okay, so what happens is that when you receive a rejection, which I don't have the slide here, unfortunately, you are given two options. You can continue to publish as Gold Open Access if you really wanted to, because you believe you could do so because you would have access to funding, you understand the benefits of Gold Open Access and you still want to do it. You can continue to do so and says, I would still like to publish my paper as Gold Open Access. You choose that option. You will then be asked to receive an invoice and you need to settle that invoice before it can be published. And of course, you can do so through any of the traditional routes, either you bearing the cost of it individually, or maybe you share with your co-collaborators, or you maybe have access to an external or another kind of fund that bears the APC cost. I'm aware of some universities that have that option, whereby if the quota for the universities for the true concept is finished, they provide another means or another mechanism for the authors to apply for another separate kind of funding just to pay the APC. So of course, please check from your university whether that is applicable. Now, let's say if you cannot afford, no access to additional funding, it's too difficult. You are, of course, given the second option, which is to publish as a non-open access paper. So, what I mentioned earlier, subscription or close. And if you take that option, you definitely can, because again, the paper has been submitted to a hybrid journal and therefore has the ability to publish as a subscription or closed journal. And in doing so, as I mentioned earlier, because it's a subscription or close, you do not need to pay the APC. All right. So even if you've gone through the entire process, at the end of the day, if not approved by university, you will not be forced to pay the APC. Okay. So if you choose that, then just go ahead, sign your publishing license, and then it gets published in the next issue or volume, ultimately, and you will not be asked to bear the APC costs. So you're never forced to do something that you're not agreeable to. Okay, so it's not that you cannot publish. You can always publish. You're not asked to retract your paper. You do not need to take your paper and then submit to another journal after that. Please don't. As long as you've already been editorially accepted, essentially you've done your job. Now it's basically up to the university to see whether they have within the funds to cover the APC cost for you itself. And of course, if you're paying for the APC yourself, it will be more expensive than if compared to the university were paying it for you directly, because that's an additional benefit, although not mentioned in any of my slides. The cost of approving the APCs through the university is cheaper than if you were to pay for it directly. So in that sense, it's a win-win, or if get rejected, then not necessarily you don't get the benefit of that in doing so. All right. So, but still, you still would have benefited from the read access part. And of course, you would have understood that if you did not get the possibility for this year, there would be a separate quota for the following year. And although we do not know that what that quota is yet for your university, this arrangement of the KONSEPt Transformative Agreement will go on for at least the next 2 years. So up to 2020, end of 2027. So just that the quota for 26 and 27 is yet to be known, and of course will be published later on by the university. So they will let you know, okay, so if your manuscript enters the AAS after 1st January 2026, it will be utilizing the 2026 quota moving forward. Okay, so I've spoke a lot. I think for a good 1 over hour now. I'm going to take a short breather just to drink some water and see whether or not we have any questions so far. Okay, so I've just paused screen sharing. I'm going to look at the chat box now. So if you have questions about this, or if you would prefer to just unmute yourself and ask me a question, go ahead and do so. And if necessary, I can always reshare my screen and show you the answer, or bring us back to the slide that is relevant to the question. Please go ahead. This is an opportunity for you all to ask questions now. Anyone?
Okay, Mr. Ken, one question from Dr. Abdul Kadir on the chat session.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you
So
share
this is
the link
about
to
the
the
slides,
journals?
right?
Yeah.
The link to the journals that are covered. Sure, of course. What I can do is basically give you the slides. Put it in the chat box here. Okay. The link is there now. You can click on that link and then scroll to the bottom of that page. There will be the list of the eligible journals that you can download. So I would recommend to refer to it probably every time you want to submit, or perhaps when you have done the pre-review process, just to double check. So you can use that link. Any other questions? Normally when we do this with other universities, of course, sometimes in person, this is the part where we are often bombarded by questions, because everyone is usually checking whether or not their current submission is going to qualify on.
Maybe I'll ask a question.
No problem, Shen. You go ahead if you want to.
For the authors, right, do they have to actually worry, oh, I should select gold OA or
Hello?
what the type of OA? Do they have to actually be very concerned?
Let me try to answer that question. But before that, I heard someone who wanted to go ahead and ask your question. Okay, so if you want to, I'll go ahead and answer Shen's question first. So with regards to choosing gold OA or not, there's nothing for you to worry about. There's nothing for you to choose. So either you basically opt for open access or not. So the version that we are offering as part of the TA is gold open access, because that is reflected as the immediately available citable version, fully copy edited and published on the publisher's platform. So this means that is the gold open access version, right? Essentially, so you won't be given an option to choose gold, green, or bronze or whatever. It will just be gold, although not explicitly mentioned that, but it's called gold open access. And therefore, the moment it's published online, that version anybody in the world can read, right? So that's the version that can be cited, has a DOI, It's the beautified version. Everything's nicely copy edited. The pictures are all arranged nicely. All the links and the hyperlinks are all working nicely. That's the one that traditionally is used as the citable version. So unless you're going to put the what we call the author accepted version in your university's repository, that is what we call in the industry as a green open access, because it's not the final version, it's not the same as the published version online on the publisher's website, but you can still have access to it via your repository. So thanks, Shed. Appreciate that question. So I
Thank
can
you.
see that Dr. Abdul Kabir has, he was the one who tried to voice out earlier. Could you please share the slide? Of course, everything will be shared with all of you through the library after this, including mine and Shed's. So stay tuned. I mean, I'm sure they'll send it to you within this week after we have given it to them. Would anybody else like to ask a question or have any confusion? You're welcome, Doctor. So I would like to, whilst you're thinking of a question, and I think Shen, you can begin to prepare if you like. Bear in mind that this opportunity is a momentous opportunity. In fact, if I can, let me just see if I can showcase, or we want to, let's say, celebrate the successes of some of your colleagues. I wanted to showcase an example of an article that had already benefited from, the TA itself. So for example, I want to reshare my screen. Oh, let's do this one. So I hope you can see my screen. I'm at the browser right now and I'm live on Springer Nature Link. So this article, dual wavelength pulse generation in a D-shaped fiber Q-switch laser with, I cannot pronounce these things. And this is the name of the article itself. As you can see, it's been published as open access. It was published as of 14th June this year. And it's part of this journal called Journal of Material Science, Material in Electronics. If I'm not mistaken, this is quite high impact factor journal. And you can see that this is an open access. It's been published by this group of researchers, and the corresponding author is A.A. Latif from UTeM. So this paper, albeit published only very recently, less than 2-3 months, has already received 396 accesses. So basically 396 times this by readers from all over the world. So once it has been published, your article, if been approved by the university, you can see this is what it looks like on the platform itself. So everything is completely visible. It's downloadable, right? This is what your article will look like, and the full text is here immediately. So it does not matter, tak kisahlah whether the viewer, so let's say I'm someone from Europe and I'm not associated with any university or research organization. If I search for this paper or something related to this paper and ended up at this paper, I can read the full text without any hindrances. And this is the benefit of being able to publish as a gold open access article. Can, of course, any author or user can then download a copy of the PDF, and that copy is, of course, then digital rights management free and can be shared with anyone. Okay, so to stop sharing, just wanted to showcase an example of that. All right, so if there are no further questions for me, then I can hand it over to you, Shen, for you to take over.
Yeah, so are we still going to give them a break or no?
You can, I think, let's say just start in 3:25 or 3:26 today.
Okay, all
To you.
right.
I'll just hand over to you to take over from here. Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
everyone.